This is episode number 148 of the Cozy Corner of Cinema, being recorded on Monday night, Monday, January 27th, 2025, at 8:31 p.m. Here we are talking about the Best Picture nominees for the Academy Awards. It's kind of a fun sort of discussion I like to do every year. I've done it for the past couple of years now, talking about the films nominated for Best Picture. It's just for fun. I think, I don't take the Academy Awards very seriously, but it's just fun to discuss, talk about these films, say, oh, have you seen this film? Oh, it's a good film. Oh, I haven't seen this one. I'm going to check, this and that. I think it's fun. I mean, you can't take it too seriously, but it is fun to kind of be in the general kind of discussion, discuss with acquaintances, films that, maybe you thought should have been nominated, maybe ones that you were not so crazy about. It's just fun, and that's why I do these. Last year was a really solid year for the nominees. We just had some really incredible films. Of course, Oppenheimer winning Best Picture was great, but then we had other great stuff like Killers of the Flower Moon, Zone of Interest. Just really wonderful films. Even some of the ones I wasn't as crazy about, I think still had their merits that made them worthwhile overall. So this year is interesting, actually. I mean, as I go along, I'll kind of let the vibe sort of suss out itself in terms of perhaps maybe how I feel about this year. But this episode may be a little longer than a half hour. I actually started recording this, and I realized I was talking so much about just the first film, Anora, that I realized there's no way I can fit all of these films into a half-hour discussion. So I'm kind of just let this roll as a rarity. Now, of the 10 films nominated, the only one that I have not seen because I have not had the ability to see is the film I'm Still Here. And that is solely because it just has not been released here yet. It may be playing in some big cities like New York and LA, and I'm not in New York or LA. I'm not in a big city, so I've not had the opportunity to see that. I will see it next week. It will be playing here, thankfully. So perhaps when I see that, maybe I'll give a brief little talk about that. But I have seen the other 9. I've actually seen them all theatrically. And I'm going to talk about the positives, the negatives, about these films, and give you the heads up on perhaps one to keep an eye out on, and all that good stuff. It's just fun. It's fun to see who gets nominated. It's fun to kind of talk about it, and that's what I enjoy doing. I'm not here to. I should probably say this before. I'm not here to dog on any film. There are some of these that I'm a bit more enthusiastic about than others. And that's not my. I'll talk about it a little bit when I get to one of the films, but it's not my intention at all to just rag on a film. I'm not particularly interested in wasting your time in doing that. So, but we're going to go in alphabetical order here. So we're going to start right at the top with the new Sean Baker film, Anora, written and directed by Sean Baker, starring Mikey Madison, who you may remember from films like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and Scream 5. We also have Paul Weissman in the film, Yura Borisov. And this won the Palme d'Or at Cannes. The past couple years, the Palme d'Or winners have been nominated. I'm trying to think. Last year was Anatomy of a Fall. The year before was Triangle of Sadness. I think the year before was Titane, but that didn't get nominated for Best Picture. And I don't remember what was won the year before. I think something I actually liked. I'm trying to remember. It doesn't matter. We're not talking about that right now. But anyways, Palme d'Or winner Anora. Sean Baker, a wonderful filmmaker. I think one of the most interesting filmmakers, one of the most interesting contemporary filmmakers, I should say. He's done some really excellent films like Red Rocket and The Florida Project, and some of his earlier films have been getting re-released on these new kind of boutique editions like Takeout and Prince of Broadway, which is coming soon. I've had acquaintances say Takeout is very good. I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard good things about it. But Anora, yeah. So whenever I walk into a film by a filmmaker who I like, I really don't want to walk in there ready to love anything. I mean, if I don't like a certain film by a filmmaker that I really enjoy, and that I'm gonna I'm gonna put the bias I can aside to not just get ready to love it or this or that. And Anora definitely comes into play here because Anora I think is a good film, but I that's kind of where I leave it at. I'm not particularly as enthusiastic about it as perhaps some of his previous work, and that's always kind of a cliche thing to say anyways. Like I'm thinking of Woody Allen film. It's like, oh, it's not as your earlier work's a lot more funny. It's not that. But Anora, it has a lot of the qualities that highlight how strong of a filmmaker that Sean Baker is, but it also has some deviations that I do think kind of bring the film down that I'll talk about. So Anora, and I'm going to go briefly about these plots. I'm really not going to spend a lot of time on them. I'm sure if you're listening to this, you're aware of them or know about them, but I also don't want to just give things away. So, but in Anora, we have this girl, Annie, played by Mikey Madison. She's working as an escort. And one day, they're like, hey, we got this guy here. He speaks Russian, doesn't know a whole lot of English. You know some Russian. Go talk to him. And they hit it off. And he's like, hey, you know what? I wanna pay you all this money to be kind of like my personal escort. The actor, I should say, by the way, his I don't know how to say this last name, but it's Mark Eidelstein, I believe. But anyway, so they start to, she agrees, they start to live together. It seems to be going well. They get married, but there are some complications in his background of his family that come into play. And the film itself, when I say it has some of the strongest stuff, some of the strongest reasons of Sean Baker's quality, they are there. His strongest stuff in his films is when he's able to kind of let these exchanges of dialogue seem almost improvised in a way, how natural they feel. Like even in the Florida Project, you have somebody, like an actor like Willem Dafoe has been in myriad films playing against, first time actors, but they are on the same level. It's something about the way he's able to direct these actors that they all feel so natural and it feels so great. And that's some of the strongest stuff here. Like I love a lot of the bickering early on between Annie and some of the other escorts, and she has this kind of back and forth between one of this other ones who doesn't like her, and Annie's talking about she's gonna get out of there and this and that, and she's better than all of them, and that stuff's all great. When the film I think gets a little too theatrical at times. There's this ridiculous scene where she's tied to a couch, and it just turns into like the Looney Tunes, man. It's just way too silly. It feels like it doesn't even feel like it belongs in the movie. It turns into just something else, way more theatrical and way more of a film than this real kind of setting. But I think unquestionably, my biggest problem with the film is the pacing of this. I think it's really uneven. It feels like three distinct films stitched together in a way that when each of them end, it feels like, oh, this is the ending to the entire film. But no, it's not. I mean, there were two distinct points in the film where I sincerely thought this is going to be the ending of the film. I mean, at one point I had about another hour of the film, or another 40 minutes, I would say. And I said, my gosh, man, what are we doing here? Because when we finally get to the ending, the place that ultimately these characters end up, I guess specifically the very final scene, I'm thinking we could have got to the same exact scene and the same exact point without the last half hour. It meanders just too much for me, to the point where I really started to notice the runtime on this. This is a little under 2.5 hours, and boy, oh boy, man, there are times where I was enjoying it. I was never bored in the film, but I definitely felt like, let's move this along. It wants to be a One Crazy Night film. It wants to be a character study, but then it doesn't focus too much on the character. Annie becomes basically a secondary character in the second half of the film, where it's like, what are we doing? There's this like ridiculous kind of like slapstick sort of tone that just doesn't mesh well with the rest of the film, man. I don't want to sound like I'm dogging on the film, because I'm really not. There is a lot that I do really like about it, and perhaps knowing the way the narrative goes on a second viewing, I could even see myself liking it more, having adjusted to that. But as it is, I think this is a well-made film. Very good performances across the board. Mikey Madison's very good in the film. A lot of actors who I wasn't familiar with. I don't know if they're first-time actors or if they had been something else. The one guy who I don't know his name. Let me get the name up here. It is Yura Borisov, who becomes like one a little bit closer to Annie. He's very good in the film. They have a good kind of back and forth, and actually he was very good in an underrated film that came out a couple years ago called Compartment Number 6, which I don't think a lot of people saw, but keep that on your radar. That's a really good film. As it is, Anora is good. I'm just not quite enamored with it. I don't. have any intention to watch it again. But I think that if I did, I would probably be a bit higher on it. But as it stands, it's good, and that's kind of where I'm at on it. We got to sip of this beverage. My throat's already dry. Good lord! And I'm looking at the clock here. I'm 10 minutes in. There was no way I could have gotten this done in a half hour. So just if you're at work, just keep this on. If you're in the car driving, just relax. It's gonna be all good and talk about these films, man. But next up, I want to get the pages up here so I can actually reference some of the actors and people involved to give them the rightful credit. The new, I mean, these are all new. What am I talking about? Brady Corbett's newest film. I just contradicted myself in the span of about 10 seconds. The Brutalist. I talked about this briefly on the last episode of Cozy Corner of Cinema. In that time, I've actually seen this film again. I had seen this on a traditional digital screen in a really crystal clear presentation. Although my problem with that presentation was the auditorium, the sound just wasn't loud enough. Now I did just yesterday at the time of this recording, I went to go see it in IMAX, and was so blown away by by this in IMAX. If you have the ability to, I cannot stress enough. Now this is letterboxed, I should say. This was filmed on 70 millimeter. It was not filmed for IMAX. Whenever you look at an IMAX poster, make sure you take a look at the difference between experience it in IMAX and filmed in IMAX. But I think that because this is letterboxed, that it actually suits in IMAX if you were centered. Because where I was, I was actually I sat somewhere I didn't normally sit, and I don't know the exact aspect ratio. I have 166 to 1, I think it is. Somebody smarter than me can know, but it works for this film. If you're sitting centered, man, you have a great shot. You have a great perspective on this. But anyways, The Brutalist, also co-written by Mona Fastvold. It is a long-running film. It is starring Adrian Brody as this character Laszlo Toth. It starts off in 1947. He comes off the boat to America, and in America now I don't want to just give the whole film away, so he finds his footing with initially in Pennsylvania. His cousin offers him work at a furniture store, and all it takes is a little bit of time for him to get his recognition. He's making different kinds of furniture. Far more distinct than the other furniture there. But anyways, this eventually gets through some circumstances, this gets the attention of Guy Pearce's character, and Guy Pearce wants Laszlo, this great architect, to build this giant community center that's going to have a chapel and a gym and a library, all this stuff. And it's a long-running story. We follow Laszlo, who comes to America, and life is just kicking him down. Everything is going wrong for him. Anytime something goes good, something gets knocked down there. It's right after the war. He's Jewish, so feels like that stigma still on him. This coincides with the United Nations officially recognizing Israel. Coinciding with Laszlo coming to America, rising up after the war in America, coming to America, making a name for himself, and the complications that come with that. There's a lot to talk about with this film. It's 3.5 hours. It has a overture. It's in 2 parts, as an intermission, and has an epilogue. And to me, of all the films nominated for Best Picture, this one, much like a Brutalist type of building that he would make with a tall hanging ceiling, this one stands far, far above the other films nominated. And that's not putting down the other films. I'm saying that this is the only one nominated that I am almost overwhelmingly enthusiastic about. With the opening of this film, which I also have to say as well, one of the big, great, booming aspects of this film is the incredible score by David Bloomberg. I'm sorry, by Daniel Bloomberg, who he had done The World to Come from 2020, which I hadn't seen. So he also done a short and a music video. I don't know his background, but his score is incredible in this film. When the opening comes up and you have these horns blasting through the IMAX speakers with the Statue of Liberty upside down in a disorientating fashion, it made me emotional sitting right there. I said, "My gosh, I am so happy to be in this cinema watching this film with this loud score right now." I think this is truly one of the best films of recent memory. In terms of a wide release film, the fact this even has a wide release is pretty incredible. I mean, this is a 3.5 hour historical drama. Now you could say, well, Oppenheimer was a near 3 hour historical drama, and you're correct, but that also has Christopher Nolan's name behind it, so he has some weight to throw around. Brady Corbett has only directed, I shouldn't say only, that sounds demeaning, but he has directed 2 films before this. He's primarily an actor. You may remember him from the remake of Funny Games, actually, by Michael Haneke, or Haneke, I don't want to say his name, but this film, it shows that runtime really doesn't mean anything as long as it is engaging. I mean, there are films that I've seen recently that are shorter than this that feel much longer. This is 3.5 hours, and especially on the second time, I was just so completely immersed in the film. I also got to mention the other actors in this. Like I said before, Guy Pearce is great in the film. One of the best scenes in it is early-ish on, I should say. His character Harrison and Laszlo have a sit down and basically kind of it spells out really their characters, whether it's better to resist or to persist, with 2 stories from their background. Like I mentioned before in the last Cozy Corner, Stacey Martin is a small role in the film. It's great to see her. I've been a fan of her for years. I think she got a real kind of classic, natural beauty to her. I think she's just a really talented actress. Felicity Jones was really exceptional. She's an actress who I've seen in many films, but I've never quite been as blown away as her performance here. It's a very interesting character where there are some complications in that relationship where there are these spikes of happiness to sadness to anger. There's one of the best scenes in the film is this really tragic and sad but also bitterly romantic scene where it's the 2 of them in bed and Laszlo's getting very emotional, and it's just oh my gosh, such an incredible scene. And the niece as well, who I was like, who is that actress, man? Who's basically mute, doesn't really talk, doesn't talk at all for a while. Played by Raffi Cassidy, and I'm like, who is that? I know she's familiar. And if I looked her up, and she was actually the young daughter from The Killing of a Sacred Deer. That very recognizable face. I go, oh, of course, that's her. As it's going along, man, just this idea of these clashing systems of Guy Pearce, who has everything, and his son, played by Joe Alwyn, who is they have no sort of respect. They no matter what, they will look at these people as tramps, as peasants, and no matter what Laszlo is going through, he almost has no choice but to persist. There's a great not even running bit, but there's this great power play repeatedly where once a character sort of loses their temper and reacts physically, then at that moment something will go wrong for them in the context of the film. So early on, for example, Laszlo is unhappy with this other architect coming in, more of a traditional architect who is not happy with Laszlo's designs. So Laszlo basically intimidates him, says his architecture is ugly, and because of this, the other architect strikes him, and he's not totally off the project, but now any doubt they had in Laszlo is gone. They're basically saying, okay, Laszlo, now you're the focus. And later on in the film, that comes into play again with another scene I won't give away. And when that comes through again at the end, something that I didn't even fully connect on the first time, because at the end, when it happens, I was like, that seems a bit much even for this. But then in the context, I go, oh, okay. And also, I want to mention as well the score. I love the variations of the main theme that Daniel Bloomberg does, especially when it comes to the epilogue. He does a remix of that to that time period that is so well done, and it's so just. I didn't even when I first heard it, when I initially saw it, I went, oh my gosh, that's just perfect, you know. To be fair, I mean, if I have any negative things to say about the film. I mean, they're brief, very brief, because I mean, this is just an incredible, incredible film. My only two real criticisms, I will say, I don't like to point out actors, like single out actors. I will say that Joe Allen's performance as Harrison's son was kind of coming and going for me. There were times where I thought he was very charismatic and menacing, but then there were other times I think he was playing it a bit too theatrically, where he's playing just a real kind of real just kind of dirtbag. He's very smug. He really looks down on Laszlo and his family and says some really awful things. And there are times when it works, and there are times when it doesn't. He has this one big outburst that I don't know if it just didn't really work for me. And not even another criticism I have. It's not really even a criticism. It's more so I don't know how I feel about it. I think there's a subplot in the third act with Guy Pearce's character that I get why it's there, but in the context of the film, they don't really do a lot with it. And I mean, it comes into play at the very end with Felicity Jones, how she reacts to something in a way I was talking about before, in terms of this kind of power play. But I think even on the second viewing, I wasn't totally sure how to feel about that certain plot point. But with that said, when I walked out of that, when those credits came up yesterday, when the end credits came up, I almost got emotional again, just like I was at the beginning of the film. I think films like this, I mean, this is also $10 million too. And just, my gosh, man. This is one of the most gorgeous looking films of recent memory. Like Adrian Brody, I haven't talked about him, but he is phenomenal in the film. I know there's some talk about, I don't really know much about it, about I guess there's some AI, something they use at the end. I really don't know about that. But he's incredible in the film. Also, one of the other actors, Isaac D. Bankole, is also very good. He sort of spans time with Laszlo, where he helps him out at first, and then I actually remember him from Night at Earth by Jim Jarmusch. But I don't want to go on and on about this film. I don't want to repeat myself. But to me, unquestionably, this is just the strongest film, by miles and miles above. Besides those criticisms, minor criticisms, I have very little negative to say on this film. I don't give any kind of numerical ratings or anything of the sort. I don't want to judge a film that way. But let me just say that it'd be the highest that I could give it. I've seen this film twice now, and I'm gonna revisit it in a couple years, and I'd feel confident at that point, should the time come, of calling this one of my favorite films. Cannot say enough positive things about this. One of these films where I walked out of the cinema and I was just so enthusiastic about this film. I loved every minute of it. Brilliant film. I just can't say enough kind things about it. But moving on from there, man. Film number 3 is I keep saying a new film, is the latest film from another one of my favorite filmmakers, James Mangold, A Complete Unknown. This was directed and written by James Mangold, also written by Jay Cox and Elijah Wald, starring Timothy Chalamet, Edward Norton, Elle Fanning, and Monica Barbaro. About the life, the first decade or so life of musician Bob Dylan, coming into New York, wanting to meet his idol Woody Guthrie, in a small role played by Scoot McNairy. Great to see him. He's been in a couple films in 2024. He was in Night Bitch. He was in Speak No Evil. Big fan of Scoot McNairy. I think he's a really excellent actor. I get him mixed up with Andrew. I'm blanking on his name right now, though. The actor from All of Us Strangers. I thought they were the same person for a while. Don't mind me there. A Complete Unknown. Now, I'm not too super familiar with Bob Dylan's music. I know, obviously, I know like Rolling Stone. I know a couple songs, but I'm not super familiar. So I'm watching this film. James Mangold's a really talented filmmaker. Timothy Chalamet is a talented actor. Edward Norton, they're all talented actors. And I'm sitting there in the film, I'm sitting there in the cinema, and I'm going to myself, there's a lot of really good stuff in this film, but boy, oh boy, does this not come together for me. it was bizarre because there would be a really good scene after a really good scene after a really good scene, but it never totally meshed. And I think a big problem that I have with the film is sort of a problem that I have with a lot of music biopics. For one, they follow a lot of the same format, and when you're doing that, you're hitting a lot of the same points. The struggle to fame, the beats here and there where it's like, oh, okay, we'll let you play backup on this other popular band song. No, I want to write my own songs. Well, what do you got? I got this song. And oh my gosh, it's the greatest song I've ever heard in my life. And the rise to fame, and oh, the fame's going to your head. And what are you going to do there, And it's got, I mean, but before I had seen this, I hadn't seen Walk the Line. And that's also directed by James Mangold, and actually they have another actor playing Johnny Cash in this. And so I wanted to watch Walk the Line after this, so I did. And before I even watched it, I went, okay, well, what will make Walk the Line what will make it a good film that I've always heard it to be? And one of the things, and the main thing that it did that separates it is that it's not just a Johnny Cash biopic. It's actually only partially a biopic. It's more about the relationship between him and Reese Witherspoon's character, whose name I apologize, I cannot remember right now. I should have said character, it's a real person. And by focusing intently on that is where I think it rises above being a standard biopic. With A Complete Unknown, it's primarily following through his folk stuff, during a lot of the protest songs, being kind of this folk singer for a lot of the youth, into when he would be, start using electric. And the film is just trying to juggle way too many things at once. It wants to focus on his relationship with Elle Fanning. It wants to focus on his relationship with Monica Barbero, I should say Sylvie, and John Baez and Pete Seeger. And it's like all these like interesting good elements in there, but all together, it's like not enough time devoted to each. I mean, if anything, I thought the most interesting part of the film was his relationship with Pete Seeger, played by Edward Norton. Pete Seeger, who is a bit more old-fashioned and maybe has a not quite a tumultuous relationship with Bob, but sees him kind of getting famous, wants to be a father figure to him, but also kind of sees where he's straying the path, and Bob's kind of resistance to that, both of them having kind of different backgrounds. And where they're both coming from. Neither of them are wrong, but that kind of clashing. It's sort of like, I wish they had just focused on one of these things. Because even there's a point in the film that I thought was interesting where it's towards the end where there's, Bob and Pete are having a difference of opinion in terms of how they want to go about this festival appearance. And the thing is that neither of them are wrong in what they're saying. They both have their valid points, but the film then bizarrely treats Peeger, good lord, treats Pete as not as the antagonist in this situation. And I'm thinking, no, I totally get where my man is coming from here. He has a very valid point, and I don't to kind of put him in that light. I was kind of like, what? I'm not totally on Bob's side either, man. It's really like, I don't hope they're not trying to get me with this. But yeah, and then, I don't know. It's like the performances themselves are good, but then, man, some of that dialogue it just felt like there's one scene, man, where Timothy Chalamet, or it's Bob and Joan Baez, and they got together, man, and Timothy has got the voice down, he nailed it, he's doing a good impression, but then he'll just say some dialogue that's just like ridiculous, man. I'm like, this just feels like a screenplay. There's like one scene where he's picking up, he picks up like a toy on a street, man. The guy's like, hey, is this for one of your kids? And he says some lines like, everybody's my kid, or something like that. I'm like, what? This feels like a lyric, man. There's a lot of really good things in the film. I don't think it all comes together, though. And I think one of the big crucial issues with any film based on a real person or any real event, or more specifically a real person, if Bob Dylan was a fictional character, if none of this was real, if Joan Baez wasn't real, then I got to ask yourself, what makes Bob Dylan this exceptional person besides being a talented musician? And the film never really answers that. It just shows you him in these situations of him kind of going from one thing to another, but never really highlighting just perhaps how important his music was, to maybe the disenfranchised youth at the time. They hit that a little bit, but then they were so focused on something else. It's like, well, we can't focus on this too long, so now we got to go with his relationship with Elle Fanning, but then we got to focus on. It's like it's just doing way too much. I just wish they had focused on just one thing. You could have just done a movie based, just about Bob and Joan Baez's relationship. Because actually, that Joan Baez documentary that came out last year, "I Am a Noise," is actually very good as well. Joan Baez, I'm not very familiar with her music, but that was such a fascinating documentary, and how really, at least in that documentary, Bob Dylan was very cruel to her, and I'm like, whoa, this is an interesting story here, man. The film is just trying to do way too much, and it should have just focused on one of these things, man. It doesn't really work for me. And even so, somebody like me who's not, I don't really know much about Bob Dylan's music. I'm watching this and I'm like, okay, I don't really know what I'm supposed to get out of this. Besides, he was a really, he was a talented singer songwriter, and he was an important voice for the people at this time. But I'm kind of drawing these conclusions on my own. The film isn't really leading me to this. If anything, Inside Llewyn Davis, I think, has these ideas done, maybe not these exact ideas, but is doing this kind of idea a lot better, and is a far more interesting character study. And that's a fictional story too, but taking place at that time with these folk singers at the time, and the frustration of, kind of what I'm talking about before, the brutalist of life just beating you down. At what point do you just say enough is enough, But anyways, moving on from there. Oh my gosh, another film. This one by Edward Berger, directed the great All Quiet on the Western Front a couple years ago, 2022, and I have not seen his film Jack from 2014, but he's also done TV. But anyways, his new film, oh my gosh, his film that is nominated for Best Picture, also written by Peter Straughan and Robert Harris, Conclave, starring Ray Fiennes, Stanley Tucci, John Lithgow, Isabella Rossellini, and it's a good drama. That's kind of where I'm at with it. I have no strong opinions on it. It is following the death of the Pope in the Catholic Church, or at the Vatican, so they have to obviously decide for a new pope, and the process that goes with it. There is some more going on that leads Ray Fiennes' character Lawrence, not entirely at a question of faith, but at a question of authority in the Catholic Church and in the Vatican, and them possibly wanting to prop up somebody who may or may not be fit for this. It's an interesting film. It's an interesting drama. It's very dry. It's so dry that you gotta want to drink some water while you're watching this. I think Ray Fiennes and Stanley Tucci are both very good in the film. There's a very sustained, very relaxed performances while there's something bigger going on. I don't want to point out, I don't mean to be a jerk. I don't want to point out any actors to say this, that. I think John Lithgow feels like he's in a different movie. I think he's playing it way too big. He has this ridiculous scene that it was just bizarre. And I'm going, what are we doing here, man? It's a good film, but my gosh, man, I just didn't really get a lot out of it at the end. I didn't get really any emotional sort of attachment to anything going on. I thought that the reveal, the sort of like last minute reveal, is an interesting idea and puts the rest of the film into question. But because you have to, there's so much to go through to get to that point, that there's nothing that even really insinuates that at any point. So when you finally get this not bomb drop, when you get to this conclusion, it's sort of like, okay, what now? And then it's over. I think of all the films, it's the one I have the least really to say on. I also saw it a couple months ago, so my memory is not the strongest. It's a good film. It's a well-directed film. It's a well-acted film. It's a solid drama, but I do think it's very forgettable. Not bad. I just, even sitting here thinking about it, I am struggling to come up with more specific things to say about it. So I'm not going to embarrass myself anymore. And I'm going to move on to the next film. A film that I saw even earlier in the year, directed by Denis Villeneuve, Dune Part 2, written as well by Denis Villeneuve and John Sfates, based on the Dune novel by Frank Herbert. A tricky novel to adapt from what I hear, and watching it, I definitely get that sense. Now, I want to give some context into this. So when I saw Dune in 2021, I'm a fan of Denis Villeneuve. I think he's a very, very talented filmmaker. One of the great filmmakers working right now. He's done some excellent films like Incendies, Prisoners, Enemy, Arrival, Blade Runner 2049. Excellent filmmaker. Excellent filmmaker. And when I've seen the David Lynch Dune, I don't really know much about. I've never read the book. I don't really know much about the universe of Dune, but I saw the film of David Lynch's, and the film that he disowned. It led him to become more of David Lynch that we would know now. He'd go on to do, right after that, he followed up Blue Velvet, and then of course become kind of the big name we know him by now, by those recognizable films. So when I heard that Denis Villeneuve was doing Dune, I said, okay, after seeing Blade Runner 2049, that's somebody who I think could do the story justice. So I saw Dune Part 1, and I was underwhelmed. I walked out unsure how to feel about it. I said, my gosh, it's a beautiful film. I really feel like I'm in this world, but I'm also not terribly interested. But I also gave that, so I said, you know what? I saw this film later in the evening. Perhaps I was a little sleepy. I'm going to give it some time. I'm going to come back to it. So I did just that. When Dune Part 2 was coming to theaters, they showed the first one again in theaters. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to stay home and watch it on Max. Because I remember, this was, I think this was like a simultaneous release in theaters and on Max, which is crazy to think of, man. I mean, it's sort of like, hey, you watch Dune on your telephone, man. You can watch it on your Game Boy. It's ridiculous. But I said, no, man, I'm going to the theater. I'm seeing a large format screen. I'm seeing it with a big surround sound system. I'm watching Dune Part 1 again. And when it was over, I kind of felt the same way. I think I liked it more on the second viewing, but I did say, I'm not too terribly interested, but hey, this is Part 1. Let me go see Part 2. I saw Part 2, and I'm kind of where I'm at again. Amazing looking film. That goes without saying. You truly feel like you're on, what's the planet? Arrakis. You have Paul Atreides, who is now with the Freeman, or the Frame. I'm sorry. People are going to say, it's this, it's that. I don't know nothing about Dune. I apologize. I saw this almost a year ago. I'm going solely based off memory. So if I get some of the names or information wrong, forgive me. I'm just a boy. But now he's with these Freeman. They're living on their own out there. The other bad guys, Stellan Skarsgård, is still trying to get this spice that controls everything. And I think what it comes down to is that I think Denis Villeneuve is one of the best people who could have made a Dune film, but I think I'm just not interested in the story. And that's kind of where I came to the conclusion on this one. I think halfway through this film, I was sitting there in that cinema, and I said, I am just not invested. I don't know any of these characters' relationships to one another. They just keep introducing characters, man. It's funny because then the film was ending and they're still introducing characters. I'm like, my gosh, man, what is happening here? I mean, at the very, very least, I understand that, okay, they're all wanting to get control over the spice. That's about as much as I know, man. This really feels like it's based off a novel, in that there feels like a lot of information that I'm not being told, which is funny, because in the first one, I remember the first, half of it, there was so much exposition. I said, my gosh, man, this definitely could not have been a film if he tried to explain all this. I don't know how David Lynch did that in 2 hours. But I'm watching this, man, and I'm like, they're just putting in characters. And I have absolutely no idea the relationship with any of these characters. I don't know what the motivation is besides just they want control of the spice. It's a beautiful looking film, but I think it's really just me, and I think that's more. All the performances are good. I think Timothée Chalamet again, Zendaya. Is it Zendaya or Zendaya? Rebecca Ferguson, Javier Bardem. Josh Brolin, Austin Butler, Florence Pugh, Dave Bautista, Christopher Walken, Lea Seydoux, Stellan Skarsgård, Charlotte Rampling, Soilia Yacoub? How do I say that name? I don't know. It's all well done. It's just me. But boy, oh boy, do I not care about the story of Dune. I forgot what Tarantino's quote about Dune. I'm just kind of like that. I'm like, I don't want to see the story anymore. I don't care about Dune. I'll see the third one, of course. I'm seeing these for Denis filmmaking. I just think that I understand the critical acclaim that these films get. I understand the love, and I'm not knocking these films at all. And in fact, I like the films, but they are just absolutely not for me. I just don't care about the spice control. I don't care about the sandworms. I don't care about any of these characters. I have no emotion to anything tied in the film. It feels so cold and so distant. And as much as I can marvel at the scenery, when I walk out of the theater, I'm not left with anything. I go, okay, that's really well made. That's about it. And it sounds like I'm being harsh. I'm really not. I'm just, this is. I mean, I was kind of even hesitant to even do this, talking about these films, because I don't want to sound like I'm dogging on these films. I'm really not. I'm just not particularly overwhelmed or enthusiastic about a lot of these. But it is a good film. It's just not for me. But I think Denny is just a wonderful filmmaker, and I mean, I'll be there to see Dune Part 3, if he chooses to make it. But but anyway, I'm not gonna go on about it. I don't want to go on all day about this. How long have I been doing this for? I mean, 40 minutes. Good lord! To think I thought I could have got this done in a half hour. All right. But can I get this shot? Oh my gosh! Hopefully I didn't go too loud to the speaker. What are we gonna talk about next? Well, okay. I gotta give a preface for the next film. I cannot stress enough, I don't like to bash films on the show. That's not what I'm here to do. If you're lending me your ears for this allotted time, I want to turn you on to films that perhaps you have never heard of, or were on your radar, or are rattling around where you're like, oh, actually, I heard that in the Cozy Corner of Cinema. That actually sounds interesting. I think I'm gonna keep an eye on that film. I see plenty of stinkers throughout the year, but I don't like to talk about them on the show. Not because I'm like, I don't want to bash a film, even though that's not what I want to do. I think, every film has its merits, even ones I think are awful, which are very, 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 very few. So, I mean, I don't like reveling and I don't like marveling and laughing at a movie. I don't like the, like, oh, so bad it's good movie. I don't like that. It's not for me. I think there's a certain smugness and kind of everybody dogging on a film and laughing at it. So I want to give all that heads up. I'm not going to talk too much about it because a lot of that applies here. I mean, this is a film I just really don't like, and I don't want to just sit here and dog on it. But next is directed and written by Jacques Arnaud, and also co-written by Thomas Bidegain and Leah Misuis. I butchered all those names. I can almost guarantee it. No, I can guarantee it. But that film is Emilia Perez. Now, it's a film that I saw a couple months ago, and honestly, I didn't really think a whole lot about it. I walked out of the film, and I was like, all right, never mind. Whatever. And then I was kind of surprised to hear it receiving such strong critical acclaim. I hadn't really thought a lot about the film. And the film follows a couple different characters. We have Zoe Saldana, who is playing this lawyer Rita, who is she is. I'm trying to remember what it is now. This is me trying to explain a plot of a movie from memory. Good lord, I think she was a lawyer for the. No, I'm sorry. She wasn't representing a. Whatever, doesn't matter. Anyway, she's a lawyer. And she basically helps on this one case. And she gets a call one day from this drug lord. And the drug lord says, hey, you know what? I need you to help me out with this. Because I want to become a woman. I want to get this gender change surgery. And Rita says, okay, let's do that. So that person then becomes Emilia Perez, played by Carla Sofia Gascon? Anyways. And complications arise from there, involving the cartel, involving Emilia's former wife, Jessie, played by Selena Gomez. We have some other actors in the film, like Edgar Ramirez, Mark Evaner. And we get a crime musical. It's listed as comedy, but honestly, I don't know how much of that is intentional. I truthfully didn't see this as a comedy, but I guess you could see that. But yes, it's well, I don't want to talk about it too long, because I gotta be upfront, really don't like this film. I think this is I remember this was around the same time that when I'm talking about before Universal kind of dogging on a film, when everyone was dogging on Joker Follow You Do, but then the Universal praised this god. I'm like, they're not that far apart in terms of the same kind of elements. A lot of the criticisms I was hearing about Joker Follow You Do, I'm like, these really apply for me more so to Emilia Perez. Um, I mean, with the big thing, one of the big, I mean, the musical numbers are just bizarre. Now, to the film's credit, musicals are not easy to do. They're not easy to make. There's like, you're doing music and choreography and singing, and all you got to do be good directing. And the choreography in these sequences is good. The whole like hospital number was good. They have people in wheelchairs being pushed around, and that's all fine and all. But good lord, man! I mean, some of these songs, the lyrics in these songs would make the Pope weep, man. I mean, it's this kind of thing where they're not singing it; they're just talking. And I'm already not a fan of that in films. And when they're talking the songs, they're not singing. I get no emotional value out of that. I find it to be really distracting. But these songs are just ridiculous, man. And I can't even remember a lot of them. Oh my gosh. The film wants you to side with Emilia. So Emilia goes through this surgery, becomes a woman, Emilia, who was a former cartel boss, or was a former drug boss, and I think there's an interesting kind of morality play you could do with that. If somebody who maybe doesn't want to be that person anymore, literally and figuratively. So perhaps they see transitioning into a woman as like an actual change, but they still have these demons to carry on with them, and maybe are they ever really somebody who commits a horrible crime or crimes, what does redemption mean for something like that? These are all interesting ideas, but the movie doesn't do anything with those. It just wants to be on Amelia's side be on Amelia's side, and I'm like, no, wait a minute, man, I can't do this, man. This is like a bad person, man. It's like, I don't need to like the character, man. I actually don't need to like the character at all, as long as the character is interesting. But the fact the film is so adamant that you were on their side, I just couldn't buy. Zoe Saldana has this ridiculous dance number talking about the drug lords and the cartels and no more, and I'm like, what are you just contradicting yourself from earlier in the film? What are you doing? Selena Gomez is in the movie for a little bit. I've seen her in a couple films. I don't really. I know she's like a singer too. I've seen her in like The Dead Don't Die, like Jim Jarmusch, and she was in Spring Breakers by Harmony Korine. I mean, none of them are like bad. I don't think, Zoe Saldana, Carla Sofia Gascon, and Selena Gomez, they're all fine in the movie. None of them are like outright bad, but boy, oh boy, is it an awkward film tonally. It's really just kind of clumsy, man. I don't want to go on anymore. I don't want to, because I can keep talking about it. I don't want to dog the film. I don't like the film. I think it's actually pretty bad. That's all I got to say about it. Well, I mean, I have more I'm going to say about it, so I'm not going to go on. I still got 3 more films to talk about, and I'm at almost an hour. So, let's talk about Nickel Boys. If I can get the name up right here. Let's talk about Nickel Boys, directed by and written by Ramel Ross. I know it's based off a book, but I don't know if it was Jocelyn Barnes or Colson Whitehead, and I think it was Colson Whitehead, because that name sounds familiar. Bear with me here for a second. I think yes, it was Colson Whitehead who wrote the book The Nickel Boys. And The Nickel Boys is a first-person POV film. We follow the friendship between these two characters, Elwood and Turner, when they are at it was like a boarding school, or it was like not a detention center, but it was like a reform school kind of. And we follow them in, I forgot what time period this takes place exactly. I didn't get what time period it was at first. And one of the characters has like a portable radio, and I couldn't really nail down the time frame on that front. But it follows them POV, first person. And I think it mostly works. I think it's actually a pretty good movie. It's a film that it took a little while to get to in terms of adjusting with the film. I would say the first half hour, I would say. It was a little bizarre. I couldn't totally get on board with it. And even now, after the fact, I think there are some problems in that first half hour, I should say, that do kind of lead on for the rest of the film. The POV, first person stuff, I think works to a certain extent. I'm not looking for continuity because, I mean, you got to throw it out the window immediately. I mean, there's a scene early on where they're eating food, and we get Elwood's perspective. He's eating oatmeal, but the camera's directly focused on Turner. And I'm thinking, like, what, is a dude staring at him? Why is we focused on him? And I thought this was POV, and then we cut to Turner's POV, the same conversation, and Elwood's like looking at him. He's looking at his oatmeal, and I'm like, man, all right. They take a lot of shortcuts to that POV. There's a lot of cuts and edits where I'm thinking, like, okay, well, maybe this is a thing where he's focusing on this certain thing or aspect, but then it's like they'll have a close-up of, like, a dude, and I'm like, this would make sense for him to be this close here, or like a close-up like a spine of a book. I'm like, what? Is he, like, staring at the side of his book? What are we doing? Amazing nitpicks. These aren't really a thing, but it's a solid film, man. I think it gets really better in the second half. The editing of the film is a double-edged sword. I think early on they put some sequences in there that don't come into play till later that I don't think really fit. It becomes kind of jumbled. It gets a little messy in terms of the editing, in terms of the narrative, where I was a little lost at times of just where we're at, what is essential, like what point are we at in the story, because it jumps around time a little bit. And then the second half, when it all starts to come together, it comes together in a satisfying way where it all starts to make sense, but also kind of in a way that doesn't make it any less frustrating, where you're going like, okay, I still don't know why you put this in the first half of the film, but there's a lot of really good editing with like old clips, and there's like this, like the ending kind of montage is fantastic. They put some like jazz music over this, like, this like shot of like the earth going around and stuff. It all looks really good, and I think as it goes along, it became a lot stronger. The two lead performances too, Ethan Harris and Brandon Wilson, are both solid. They both have to hold up the film, and when the film, because we also cut to the future as well. With Elwood as an older man, and that's all in third person. So when the film we actually see when it transitions from first person to third person. I think that's really well done. A really just kind of quick but solid editing choice. It's a good film, man. I think it's a solid drama. I wouldn't even say a little too long, because I was never bored, but I think the editing is just a little all over the place at times. The story is a little muddled, and there's a subplot that becomes the primary focus in the third act, of a dark element that I think probably should have had more focus in the film. It seems like, I mean, they mention it at one point, and I'm like, oh, okay, it's going to come back into play. And it doesn't really come back into play until the very, very end. And I'm like, oh, all right, well, that seems kind of a bigger deal than a mention. But a good film. Good film, and I would say the POV for the most part works. I mean, it's also got to mention other films' POV of, like, the Maniac remake, which also, at times had to do, wasn't exactly entirely POV, but it still works. It's an interesting kind of way to look about it. The techniques they use, like early on when he's a young child and his mother's ironing, we see his reflection in the solid kind of steel or metal iron, and it's great the way they do stuff like that. He's on the bus, we see his reflection in the window. It's solid stuff, solid filmmaking right there. Two more films, man. All right. The Substance, directed by the name of the woman who I'm going to pull up right now. That is Coralie Fargeet. Why do I even bother trying to pronounce these names? She directed the film Revenge from a couple years ago. It was a good rape revenge film. I heard that film and this film have a real kind of, not even a feminist slant, but they have a feminist kind of, very prominently female-focused. Not just in the main characters, but the message of the film. Substance got a lot of talk earlier this year, and it played at some festival I don't remember. Got distributed by Mubi. Followed Demi Moore, an aging actress who is now running this yoga show. She gets canned by her boss, played by Dennis Quaid, because she's getting too old, and life is just not looking up for her, man. She's just like, man, what am I doing? But basically, she comes into contact with this drug called the Substance. Now you're like, what is the Substance? Let me tell you, it's the greatest thing you'll ever have in your life, as long as you use it correctly. And of course, no one ever uses it correctly. But we get a great power play back and forth between these two characters who they repeatedly say are the same, but are distinct, but they say you're this is still you. It's the same person, but they're distinctly different too. We have Sue, played by Margaret Qualley, who's had a really solid year. She's been in she was in Driveway Dolls, and then Kinds of Kindness, and now this. And they both play really well off each other. Demi Moore is tired. She's very self-conscious. This one of the strongest scenes in the film doesn't have any dialogue. It's her in front of a mirror, and the way that whole plays out is very sad, very tragic. Because even Demi Moore is somebody who's, I think, it aged very beautifully. She's still a very beautiful actress. The way that people like that, no matter what, even though they're beautiful, they can't ever see themselves that way. They're always going to see themselves, and I have a spot right here, I have a wrinkle right here. No matter how much you tell them, no, you're beautiful. But then Sue, who is like kind of like a ditzier sort of version, not ditzy, but she's definitely she's more active. She's definitely dressing more provocative. They're bringing the yoga show into a more kind of contemporary setting that's very sexualized and stuff, and that's all well and good. But boy, oh boy, if someone should be arrested for being in this film, it should be Dennis Quaid, because he steals every scene that he's in. Dennis Quaid made me laugh so hard in this film. He is so over the top. He is so ridiculous as Elizabeth's boss that every time he was on screen, it's just funny how you have. I mean, this is a very pro-female, very feminist film, but then you have Dennis Quaid, who just, for me, steals every single scene he's in. He is playing it so over the top in a way that works. The first scene he's in, I wasn't really sure about him. He's eating this shrimp. It's disgusting. We're getting these close-ups. We're getting these like sounds, which is actually funny enough. A short film I made recently, I think I unintentionally sort of took something from that, where not directly from this, but the grossness of eating is something I was very much maybe unintentionally inspired by. I don't know. But he is so funny in the film, and he is playing it so big in a way that's not annoying. And funnily enough, actually, Ray Liotta was originally supposed to play that character, but unfortunately passed away. But Dennis Quaid is just so funny in that role. I mean, she's like talking like, I need, the Sue is like, I need to take some time off work, and I'm gonna have a weird schedule, this and that. And you think he's gonna freak out, and he goes, "Of course you can have the time off. You can have whatever you want." I think they should have given him an Oscar nomination. Maybe he did. I didn't even look, honestly. But he steals every scene that he's in, and I can't choose a favorite performance of any year, but of the performances of recent memory, that is the one where I was every time just put a huge smile on my face. Incredibly well shot. The tone is really well balanced between being extreme with its comedy. Of course, there's a lot of body horror stuff, and that's all well and good. And you're asking yourself, you're saying, well, Dan, what are you talking about earlier? You're talking about you're not as enthusiastic about these other films like The Brutalist. You're going off about how good the substance is. What are you talking about? And hold your horses. Let me get a sip of this drink, and I'll tell you all about why I'm not as enthusiastic about this film. And it's for one big reason, and that's the last 30 minutes. I thought the film nailed it. It was sticking the landing. I said, okay, this is probably how it's going to end, but that's okay. It's safe, but it works. And then the last 30 minutes happen, and boy, oh boy, did I not like that. I'm not a special effects guy in terms of, I don't watch a film for the special effects. I don't seek that out. To me, the cringiest stuff in a film like this is the more simple stuff of needles just going into your wrist. Or into your wrist, or getting a cut or something like that. Like ooh, that's kind of gross. Like a deformed finger. It's like, ooh, that's kind of gross. I think the last 30 minutes kind of goes a bit too big in terms of visually by having this really kind of just I don't know, man. This really ridiculous kind of decision that I don't know if it was the best decision to make. But not even with that. I mean, tonally, the tone was balanced so well the rest of the film, but then it just becomes a B movie, and a really dumb B movie. I mean, it's just ridiculous, man. It's an ending for an audience to clap at, but me watching this in a fairly empty theater, I'm just thinking like, man, I feel like I walked into a different movie. Like, I don't even know what we're doing here now. It just gets so big so ridiculous. And even with the character in question, I mean, the character's reaction to something, it's like, this contradicts what they react to earlier. There's no reason why they would even react this way to this. This is ridiculous. And then it just kind of meanders to an ending where I get the message, I get the point, and they have to hammer it in again to a really clumsy ending. The ending was enough for me to not be able to call the film great, but very good. I think Coralie Farge is a very talented filmmaker, but Revenge, I had the same kind of problem as well, where not the ending of that, but it's like, oh, it's a good rape revenge film. And they have this ridiculous choice, which everyone talks about in the film. I won't say it, but it's this ridiculous choice that I think could have worked if the film was a bit more ridiculous to match that. But they have this choice, this narrative choice that happens halfway through. I'm like, what? Like why even go this way? This is like, you didn't have to go this way. But hey, with that said, it is a very good film. 2.5 hours. I don't think it needs to be that. This is a year of long film. Smile 2 is 2.5 hours. I mean, this is ridiculous. Definitely does not need to be 2.5 hours. I do think that there is some fat in the film, no pun intended, you could cut out, but very good. It is a very good film. Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley, and especially Dennis Quaid, are great. It is a good film. I like it a lot. It was one of my favorites of last year. Just not great. But I think very good is very good. Holy moly, I've been talking for an hour. This has been nonstop. I've had to pause it briefly a couple times, but here I am on an hour. Oh my gosh. And we're gonna wrap it up with this last film. Can't even talk right now. This last film, directed by, I gotta pull up the tab here. Hold on one moment. Make sure I have rightfully due credit. Directed by John M. Chu. Written by Winnie Holzman and Dana Fox, is Wicked. Or Wicked Part 1, as it says original title here. But I guess Wicked, it sounds more better. You don't call it Part 1, because I'm like, what the hell, where's Part 2? Wicked, alright. Based off the Broadway play, based off the book. From the Broadway play, based off the book. I don't know if the book is canon to Wizard of Oz, but I know the Broadway play isn't, or Broadway musical, I should say, and the film definitely can't be canon because it doesn't make a lick of sense. But I won't get into that. Anyways, Wicked, box office smash, huge film. Everybody at least knows about it, even if you're unfamiliar with it. I remember back at school we watched a interesting documentary about, I think it was like Avenue Q, that was coming out at the same time as Wicked, and Avenue Q winning the Tony. What is the musical awards for the Broadway awards? I think it's Tonys. And anyways, I don't know why I'm done with talking about that. But Wicked, man, we have Elphaba, who is green in a world where no one else is green. She's like, what the hell? I'm born green, but I'm going to go to this school. Well, I'm not going to this school. I'm dropping off my sister. Going with my sister, Nessa Rose, played by Marissa Bode. And she goes there. It's a preppy kind of school. It's a very colorful school. We have Galinda there, played by Ariana Grande. I shall say Elphaba is played by Cynthia Erivo. And she goes there. Galinda is trying to impress Madame Morrible, played by Michelle Yeoh. And through some circumstances, Elphaba gets on Madame's radar and ends up slowly forming a friendship with Galinda, because they all want to get to Oz. They hear great things about Oz. The wizard's there. He's a great guy. Does great things. Because he's the Wicked Witch of the West, at what point does she become bad? How does she become so wicked, as the title will suggest? Well, you better watch the damn film to find out, dude. I'm not going to tell you here. You got to watch the film. Wicked, man. Okay, so this is almost 3 hours. It's 2 hours and 40 minutes. And boy, oh boy, does not need to be that long. I'm not going to start with that. Wicked, man. You know what? It's an interesting film. There's a lot of really good things in it. There's a lot of not so good things in it, but I get why this has kind of touched a nerve with a lot of, not touched a nerve, that sounds like a bad thing. It was really kind of meant a lot to a lot of people. I'm sitting in the cinema and I'm watching a large format theater. It's a packed house. The surround sound is incredible. And I'm watching this film, a film that I wasn't terribly interested in seeing. I watch all kinds of films, and there's nothing I won't watch, but I wasn't terribly interested in seeing this. But there's a lot of really good things in it. First off, Cynthia Erivo, or is it Erivo, or I don't know how to say her name. Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande are just incredible singers. I'm not familiar with Ariana Grande's music. I don't. I might know a song. I really don't know, but I don't know where Cynthia Erivo is from. I think she might be from Broadway. I don't know, but they both sound incredible in the film. Really, everyone sounds incredible. The actor Jonathan Bailey plays the character Fiero. He has my favorite musical number in the film. I forgot what the song was. It was I think "Dancing Through Life" is the song, or it's the lyric. But it's this big kind of theatrical scene in like a library. You're dancing on the walls and this and that. It's an incredible scene. I think John Chu is a really solid filmmaker in terms of getting like a big cast together. Really gets everyone their own time to shine. The choreography is top notch. And man, if this is your thing, you really just kind of feel the thunder of this film. And when the film ends and it kind of rises to this big kind of musical number, boy oh boy, you felt it in that theater, man. And the audience gave it a big round of applause. And even me, who I'll admit this film wasn't really for me. Even I'm like, man, I get it. I get the appeal. I got my problems with the film. For one, this feels like an extended cut of a film. What you're asking yourself, well, man, this is part one. Why is this in two parts? I'll tell you why, man. It's because why Mr. Krabs opened up the Krabby Patty, man. It's because for that money. I don't think there's any damn reason for this to be in two parts, man. There's a lot of milling around in this film. There's a lot of parts in this film, man, where the characters are nothing's happening. And when I say nothing's happening, it's setting up for stuff. But boy, oh boy, there's a lot of meandering in this. There's a whole subplot with Elphaba and Fiero. I'm just like, man, I just don't care about any of this. And again, there's like, oh, we're going to get to Oz. The film's wrapping up. You better believe it's not going for another 40 minutes. And I'm like, my gosh, man. Jeff Goldblum becomes a prominent character in the second half of the film, and he's very good in the film. I think that this does have kind of a problem with a lot of, when you're basing something off a big property, there's a lot of like, you have to have those callbacks that I think are really necessary. It's like, oh, they make a big deal about the hat that Elphaba gets, and the wizard is like, oh, what color should I make the road? Blue? I don't know about that. Green? I don't know about that. Oh, yellow? No, that could work. It's like, all right, we don't need this. But it's just a bit too much. It's a bit too loud. It's a bit too big. A bit too theatrical. I think it's a good theater film. I think if you were to see it in a theater, you saw it in IMAX. I'm sure it'd be amazing. And I'm sure at home it sounds great too if you have a great sound system and all that. But it's definitely made to be seen in a theater. The audience that I saw with were really liking it. And I will say, some of the strongest stuff in the film was when it was just Galinda and Elphaba. When they're in their in the dorm room, and not even like the room that she's in, they're back and forth, they're arguing, they have a song like arguing back and forth. That stuff is all really good. I think it's a really well directed film. It's kind of just like Dune, where it's just really not for me, but I can see how strong of a film it actually is, how accomplished of a feat this actually is. I think it's an interesting film. I don't really have any strong opinions on it, positively or negatively. I think it did as much well as it did do poor. It's kind of typical of a film for this to come out this time of the year, this big kind of bombastic musical. They did to get a bunch of Academy Award nominations. They had The Greatest Showman and like Into the Woods, and they tried with Cats, so that didn't work. But then like Les Mis, these big kind of musicals like that, and it's fine. You knew this was going to get nominated for Best Picture, and that's fine. It's a well-made film. It's enjoyable. Would I watch again? No, but seeing it in the theater, it's fun. It's enjoyable enough. Oh my gosh. Well, that is the longest episode of Cozy Corner of Cinema ever. Probably will forever be the longest one. I'm not even going to bother rambling on too much more. I've talked for over an hour, but I hope you all have been enjoying yourselves. Hopefully this was, to quote Brutalist, intellectually stimulating, and if not, oh well. That's okay. But thank you guys so much for listening. If you made it this far, God bless you. And if you didn't, that's okay too. Just giving it a chance is all it's good enough for me. Okay, that's all I got. Thank you, and until next time.